Hey everyone, and welcome. If you're studying for an AWS cert, especially the Solutions Architect exam, you know that identity is a massive topic. So today, we're going to break down a service that you absolutely have to know inside and out, Amazon Cognito.
So picture this. You've just built the next killer app. It's amazing, and you know it's going to scale to maybe millions of users. But then you stop and think, how are you going to handle all the signups, the sign-ins, the password resets, and do it all securely? Trying to build all that yourself? I mean, it's a huge headache, super complex, and honestly pretty risky. So what's the alternative?
Well, this is where AWS comes in with a really powerful answer, Amazon Cognito. And it's not just one simple thing. It's a whole identity platform, completely managed for you. It's a user directory, it handles all the complicated authentication stuff, and even helps with authorization for accessing your other AWS services. Basically, it takes all that heavy lifting off your plate. All right, so here's our game plan to really help you nail this for the exam. We're going to start with the basics, then get into the two most important parts, user pools and identity pools. After that, we'll see how they work together in the complete flow, look at some real-world architecture patterns, and finally, we'll talk about the money, the pricing.
Okay, so the key to really getting Cognito is understanding that it's built on two main pillars. If you get this one thing right, I promise, everything else is going to click into place.
Seriously, if you're going to remember one slide from this whole thing, this is it. On the left, you've got user pools. They are all about authentication. Their job is to answer one question: who are you? Think of it like this. The user pool is the bouncer at the front door of a club, just checking your ID. That's it. On the right, you've got identity pools. They handle authorization. So after the bouncer confirms who you are, the identity pool is what gives you that VIP wristband. It answers the next question. Okay, now that you're in, what can you actually do? What can you access? Authentication first, then authorization.
All right, so let's dig a little deeper into that bouncer, the user pool. This is your fully managed directory that handles that whole sign-up and sign-in experience for every single one of your users.
And man, they are packed with features you would otherwise have to build from scratch. You get a secure directory, obviously. You get pre-built login screens, or you can build your own with the SDK. Now here's a huge one for the exam, federation. This lets your users sign in with accounts they already have, like Google, Facebook, or even corporate logins using SAML. And of course, you get all the critical security stuff like MFA and the ability to customize workflows with Lambda Triggers, which we'll get to in a bit.
This diagram here really shows you just how smooth this whole thing is from the user's perspective. Your app just sends the user over to a login page that Cognito hosts. The user puts in their username and password, maybe an MFA code, and Cognito does all the hard work. Once it's all good, Cognito sends the user right back to your app. But now they have special tokens that prove they are who they say they are. It's super clean and really secure.
Okay, so our user is in the door. The bouncer checked their ID, now what? Now it's time to get that VIP wristband. Let's talk about identity pools.
So what's an identity pool's main job? It's pretty simple, actually. Its whole purpose is to hand out temporary, limited privilege credentials so your users can access other AWS services directly from your app. And here's a key feature you've got to remember for the exam. This also works for guest users, people who haven't even logged in. It gives them a secure way to get to public resources. So how does this magic actually happen? Well, your app takes that token it got from the user pool and shows it to the identity pool. The identity pool then acts like a broker. It takes that token, checks if it's legit, and then basically trades it in for a set of temporary AWS keys. It does this by using an IAM role, which is just a fancy way of saying a set of permissions that you, the architect, have already defined. This is what lets your mobile app securely upload a photo right to an S3 bucket without ever having to store secret keys in the app itself.
Okay, this is where it all comes together, the big aha moment. Let's put the bouncer and the VIP wristband in the same room and trace the entire flow, from the moment a user logs in to when they get to access something protected in AWS.
Let's just walk through this step by step. First, your user signs in with the user pool. Second, the user pool gives your app back a JSON Web Token, a JWT, as proof. Third, your app takes that token and hands it over to the identity pool. Step 4, and this is really the magic trick, the identity pool calls up the AWS Security Token Service, you'll see it called STS, and trades that identity token for actual temporary AWS credentials. Fifth, your app gets those credentials back. And finally, step 6, your app can now use those keys to talk directly to other AWS services like S3 or DynamoDB with exactly the permissions you defined.
All right, we've got the fundamentals down cold. Now, let's level up a bit. For the Solutions Architect exam, just knowing the what isn't enough. You have to know how to use it in real-world designs.
So, a super common scenario you'll run into is building a multi-tenant SaaS app, where you have lots of different customers using your software. In this case, a really strong pattern for security is to give each customer, each tenant, their very own user pool. Why would an architect do this? Well, it's all about isolation. It gives you the highest level of data separation and lets you set different rules, like password policies, for each customer. It's a really powerful tool.
But what happens when the default flow isn't quite enough? What if you need to run your own custom code during the sign-up or login process? Well, that is exactly where Lambda Triggers come in. Honestly, the best way to think of them is as hooks that let you inject your own logic right into Cognito's workflow. For example, you could have a Lambda trigger before sign-up to check if a user's email is from an approved company. Or you could create a completely custom login challenge, like asking a security question. This is how you make Cognito fit your exact needs.
Okay, and as an architect, no decision is final until you've thought about the money. We got to talk about cost. And with Cognito, pricing is all about which features you need, so picking the right tier is a big deal. So if you look at this table, you'll see the basics, like MFA and Federation, are actually on the free Lite tier, which is great. But if you want to do things like customize your access tokens or put your own branding on the login page, you've got to jump up to Essentials. And then there's the Plus tier, and that is all about locking things down with advanced security, like threat protection and checking for compromised passwords.
Now, talk is cheap, right? Let's look at what this actually means for your wallet when you start to scale. For an app with, say, 95,000 monthly active users, check out the difference. The Lite plan is about 4,000 bucks. But if you need that custom branding from the Essentials tier, the price jumps to over 14,000. And for the top tier security, you're looking at $19,000. As the architect, you're the one who has to make that call. Is that feature worth the extra cost? That's the job.
So I wanted to show you this quote right from the developer guide. Don't worry, you do not need to memorize this formula for the exam, but what you should understand is what it means. It's showing you that Cognito is using industry-standard, heavy-duty cryptography, like HMAX, under the hood to make sure everything is secure and authentic. It's a nice little peek that shows you just how robust this service is.
So look, if you forget everything else we talked about today, please remember this for your exam. User pools are for authentication. They answer the question, who are you? Identity pools are for authorization. They answer the question, what can you access? Who and what? That's the key.
And that's pretty much the whole story on Cognito. We've hit the core concepts, the flows, and the patterns you need to know. It really makes you think, though, as we're all moving toward a passwordless future with things like passkeys, how are services like Cognito going to evolve? What will our digital identities even look like in a few years? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.